I'm Judy Cho, also known as Nutrition with Judy. I am board certified in holistic nutrition. My journey with carnivore really started because I got sick. I was a management consultant for 12 years, plant based for 12 years as well. And then all of a sudden, I was struggling with depression. I got on antidepressants and eventually got on
Mm.
antipsychotics for getting really, really sick. And never once did anyone say that my plant based diet was not ideal for me. So I basically had a breakdown, and my oldest son was 6 months old. Something happened. I took antibiotics. I don't really know what the mechanistic reason was. I landed in the mental hospital because I was just
Oh,
acting off. I mean, I get really emotional still thinking about it. I was breastfeeding, and then I was in the medical or the mental hospital, and I was on a mandatory hold, meaning that they determined I was a harm to myself. And so I was on a lockdown for 72 hours. And so I was forced to stop nursing. And the class C drugs of the
oh,
yeah, so the class C drugs, you're not allowed to nurse. I didn't know any of this. So, but my memory would be, and I would hear from my best friend that would come visit me. I'd ask, "Where's Caleb? I need to nurse him." And they would have to keep going through and telling me, "You no longer nurse." And then I would ask why. And then I would start crying
oh.
and not knowing that I'm going through the same thing for 3 days in a row. And I was plant based then. So then my husband didn't know what to do. So started my child on soy milk, breast milk, or formula. And it was just a hard process for all of us. And I don't know the medication. It didn't really work for me, at least the antidepressant side of it. I listened to them for the next 3 months. I took the full dose, and then it wasn't working enough that I went on 300 milligrams, which is the highest dose back then for that specific SSRI. And it wasn't working enough. And that's when um, they recommended the antipsychotic to add to it, but it was starting to make me gain weight and suffering from an eating disorder. I was not okay with that. So it was just this constant
Yeah.
back and forth of struggling with mental illness. But I didn't feel any after effects of getting off it because I lost my memory when I did the antipsychotics, but then um, it just didn't work for me as well.
As you know, I've been on the carnivore diet, specifically like lion diet or ruminant meat, for 5 years. And my assumption getting onto the diet was once I became asymptomatic, was I'll slowly be able to reintroduce foods, right?
Right.
Like there's some sort of gut healing that takes place and I will slowly be able to reintroduce foods. But that hasn't happened for me. Like before diet or when I first started, they were so bad that like it would cripple me for like a month. And now it's not like that.
Sure.
So in that way it's gotten better, but there's still something missing. 2 years ago, I think, I realized I had histamine intolerance. And recently I started taking this enzyme, DAO enzyme,
Mm.
and I was like scared of taking it because it's derived from porcine kidney and I can't eat pork.
Okay.
So I was like, no, I'm not taking any supplements. But I started taking this enzyme and now I can eat kind of aged meat without having any digestive upset or anything.
We have a private practice. We focus on root cause healing. We use the Carnivore Cures all meat elimination diet, similar to the Lion diet when you start at baseline. And what we found over the years is that carnivore doesn't fix everything. So I thought because I suffered from such bad mental illness, eating disorders, and all of that has resolved. Over the years, every single one of my client patients have challenged me to think otherwise. So I used to think liver was the best thing to add if you're nutrient deficient or if you're anorexic. It's not always the case. And so then I realized that carnivore doesn't fix everyone. It does a lot of improvement because it's essentially reducing your overall inflammation, especially when it comes to foods
Mm-hmm.
that your body is intolerant to. If I were to explain CIRS, there is a genetic component to it where basically 20 to 25% of the population, so it's about 40 million plus people, have a different genetic wiring or code from their parents. It's on chromosome 6. It's called the HLA. And that number, based on your genetics again, will affect how your immune response is to the outside world, whether it's food, whether it's the environment. I think in the carnivore community, when you have eaten all meat for 6 months to a year and the needle has not moved enough to optimal health, healing. If you choose to add other things, you can't add it back. That to me then means that carnivore is becoming a band-aid. It's optimal diet, but still there's something else. And that's when I think people should start looking at environmental toxins. And one of them is
Mm-hmm,
related
mm-hmm.
to CIRS. We have two sides to our immune system. One is the innate immune side, and then one is the adaptive. And just to make it super simple, the innate is just the initial immune response. It's like the more basic immune function, the macrophages, just really simple things. And when the foreigner, the invader, is just less than it's a lot more complicated. The innate side will then release antigens or communications to the adaptive side of saying, hey, T cells, B cells, memory cells, I need you to come in and remove this toxin because we can't handle it. So the way that it does that is releasing cytokines. It releases all these immune things to communicate. And then normally the adaptive side will come in and remove it. That 20 to 25% of the population cannot do the trade-off. The innate side gets super inflamed and is saying, hey, there's this foreigner or invader in our system and I need it to be removed. And this side has no idea and will never know. We get exposed to these biotoxins. It could be water damaged buildings. It could be a recluse spider bite. It could be Lyme. Lots of things that
Okay.
are natural toxins in our environment, and it gets into our system. And the 20% of the population does not recognize to remove it, even though the innate side sees it. And so what ends up happening is over time, it is not the actual mold itself or the Lyme itself. It's the inflammatory response has gone awry.
Mm,
And that's the
cool.
illness. And so what we're trying to do over time with CIRS is essentially we're trying to quell that immune response. We're actually, you can take some binders and the binder is very specific, but if you take a certain binder, it will actually pull those toxins that are in your system that your other side of your immune system was not able to remove, and then you can start to find healing. It's mostly from water damaged buildings, and water damaged buildings can have endotoxins, biotoxins. Well, it'll trigger that immune response. So I have seen people with long COVID. I think they're honestly suffering from CIRS. It's just their immune system is not able to now turn off that level of inflammation because, again, the other side is not able to recognize it and shut it off. So there are a lot of children that show or present CIRS symptoms, and it's very, very light things. So if your parents, and maybe if you have the genetic thing, obviously one of your parents has it, if not both. If they give you like double whammy of the genes, your chance of being affected is
Okay.
higher. So there are kids that have the HLA, and then they will present even at a young age. One of the biggest symptoms is when your child is born, if they're having GERD issues, so like they drink a lot of breast milk or formula and they're always throwing up, so they can't tolerate anything. And then when they're in like elementary school, these symptoms are they get headaches frequently or stomach aches, or they're tired more than the average child. These are the small symptoms. And then it's just over time, if the bucket, your toxin bucket load gets filled and now it starts overflowing, that's when the symptomology becomes really present, and you will start feeling what they call it a multi-system, multi-symptom. So it affects many of your systems in your body, and then it has multiple symptoms. So where I think CIRS gets really confusing for people is there's a whole process and cascade that occurs, and it starts affecting your adrenal function, your androgens or your hormones, your sleep, your pain. And so people start getting misdiagnosed for so many different things. And people say, oh, it's fibromyalgia. Oh, you have chronic fatigue syndrome. And the question should always be why? Why did that happen? What is going on? And I just saw a statistic where if you get a second diagnosis, 80% is usually different. And this study was done by Mayo Clinic. So how do you know that the diagnosis you got is correct? So in 2008, I believe the US GAO accepted that CIRS is an illness, that mold in your homes from water damaged buildings can make you sick. So it is accepted. This is the only peer-reviewed, evidence-based protocol that has over 25 papers written on it. I think it will be the one that's adopted. I know that there are so many mold protocols online, and it's not getting to the root cause. The root cause is the chronic inflammation. the cytokines releasing and affecting leptin, and then leptin receptors are releasing lots of leptin and causing some people to be overweight. But it's because they're trying to release a hormone called melanocyte stimulating hormone. And what ends up happening is it gets blocked from being produced, and that it's that MSH that then affects all the different downstream symptoms. When
Huh.
we get sick from this illness, we produce a lot of cortisol, and that affects our brain. Initially, our brain will become, I guess, it has a lot more excess cortisol in the hippocampus. Then it affects our hypothalamus, and then it affects our pituitary. And at first, that innate immune system is trying to tell the adaptive side, there's a fire, we need to resolve this. And cortisol is obviously that stress response. Nothing happens. And over time, the brain says, we need to shut down. We have so much saturation of cortisol in the hippocampus. And when that shutdown happens, then the other parts of the brain start also saying, we need to shut down to protect this body from dying. And when that shutdown happens, that's when that master hormone, the melanocyte stimulating hormones, reduces. And it's when that reduction happens that every downstream symptomology starts to occur. That's when our hormones get messed up. Again, the chronic pain, lack of sleep, the electrolyte stuff. I think when people say, I can't balance my electrolytes on carnivore, yes, when we don't eat or consume a lot of glucose, we have less water retention. So what if we are naturally imbalanced in our electrolytes, no matter how much sodium or electrolytes we consume, we're not balancing? What if that's always an issue? Carbs will mask it, but it's not resolving it. And one hormone, to give you an example, on CIRS, when you have the low MSH, it affects your antidiuretic hormone. And that ADH is what helps you to hold on to water. And so there's a lot of carnivores, they're constantly thirsty, constantly drinking, but the ADH hormone is low. So they just keep peeing it out. So they never feel hydrated. So what if that's the issue and not an electrolyte imbalance, so that they need to add carbs?
Both my parents are like, they're good now.
Okay.
They're good now, but they're so sick if they're not on this diet that they would be dead. Like, it's crazy. My mom has lupus and my dad has like severe depression if he's not on the diet, and amongst other things with like psoriasis, he had GERD. And my dad, his reactions are like they're more acute, I would say, when he accidentally eats something. So if he goes to a restaurant, he gets hit with something and he knows that he's having a reaction because he gets extremely anxious, but he gets so thirsty. He'll drink like 7 liters of water. Like, he's just like waking up at night drinking water. And we thought, well, maybe it's your body trying to like flush out whatever's giving you an allergic reaction. But it would be nice to get like less reactive for them too.
Right.
Particularly my dad.
One big component of CIRS is mental illness. It's a huge component. So a lot of the markers, they become it affects your blood-brain barrier, causes it to be permeable. So a lot of people, I'll just give you a few examples of my client patients. A lot of people have been diagnosed with bipolar. They will go to their doctors and then they'll do all the blood work on the adaptive side, which is not the side that this is affecting. And the doctor says, your CRP looks good. Your insulin is good, right? Because they're on a carnivore diet. Everything's good. I think it's in your head. And so they recommend them to a psychiatrist and they get them on meds because they are believing or feeling these fake symptoms. And as we test for CIRS, we realize actually there are toxins that are getting into your brain because it's breached from the blood-brain barrier because of the certain markers that are inflamed. With all that said, the best way to test is there's a vision test. I would say that's the most economical way to start. So if you fail this vision test, and it's a contrast sensitivity test, the Air Force is the one that created this test, and what they do, and they still use it now, is they want you to take a simple test to see, can you see contrast? And it's really faint. It's like these gray squiggly lines. And if your brain function isn't optimal, you will not see those lines. And it's $15. You could do it online if you have a decent computer, modern electronic. Cool. If you fail it, there's a 90% chance you are suffering from CIRS. And then afterward, the other thing to look at is there's a cluster of symptoms that most CIRS people are suffering with. Now, carnivore will mask some of them. So a lot of people will say, oh, I don't suffer from a lot of those symptoms anymore. Maybe I only have half. But the question is it because carnivore is doing so well with that? So that's the other thing to look at. If you fall into 8 of the 13 clusters, which are symptomologies, you just have to look at the chart. and then you fail the VCS test, the chance of you having SIRS is 98%. In terms of the environmental allergies, immune system, this is how I think of it. If your body's immune system and it's not being affected by other things, so let's say foods, right? So plant toxins, plant
Yeah.
sensitivities, then your body should get stronger so that now
Yeah.
it has the ability and room to deal with the environmental stuff. So if you have seasonal allergies, I used to have seasonal allergies when I used to be plant-based. I have zero seasonal allergies. When you're dealing with something other than food, that's why it's not happening. And that's where I think carnivore becomes a band-aid. And I mean, I am a carnivore nutritionist. I believe in carnivore. It's healed me so much. It's why I don't think the fruit and honey stuff is ideal. But I have to be honest for my patients and clients of there is a point where carnivore only works to a certain point and then you have to look further. I don't think it means that you have to remove carnivore as a healing mechanism. You may be able to become like ketovore or a carnivore plus some plants over time. Two ways that SIRS affects testosterone, right? We hear that so much in the carnivore community of, oh, this diet's going to ruin your testosterone. And one, if you eat sufficient fat, that should benefit it. But one thing is, so testosterone, once it comes into the body, SIRS increases your aromatase enzyme. And for men, especially when you are even taking exogenous hormones or the testosterone, it will convert a lot of the testosterone to estrogen because of that aromatase. So, how do we know that some of the men are not suffering from SIRS, which is then converting their testosterone to estrogen? And it's not that they're just low on T because of the diet. I have seen so much healing in some of my sickest clients and patients where I thought maybe this is the best they can be, where they graduated from a grade F of health to a C.
Yeah.
And now they're actually close to an A. I have one client, I just shared her story. She was never able to consume dairy. She had histamine reactions for anything she ate. She only ate grass fed. She did a lion diet. She improved a lot. But then her symptoms would eventually kind of come back depending on the environment. And when she started working with me, we did gut supports. Again, it helped a little bit, but not enough until we found SIRS. And she's been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, Hashimoto's, and she has SIRS. She's done the whole protocol. She's not fully done yet. She's been doing it for 9 months, fixing the environment so the home is safe and not water damaged. She can tolerate any plant she wants. She could do dairy. She used to take sinus medication every night to sleep because her nasal, and that is also affected by SIRS. She does none of that. And she's not even done with the whole protocol. She's not on that VIP spray yet, but she's taken the binders to remove most of the biotoxins that have come in her body and caused inflammation everywhere in her system. So if you are part of that 20% of the genetic susceptibility, it won't go away. So it doesn't know how to remove it because the adaptive side. And most of the mold that we get sick from is not the water damage, the one that the active mildewy smell. It's when spores or mold dries up and then it breaks into fragments. And I think one spore breaks into thousands of fragments. And it's those really small bits that can breach the blood-brain barrier. And those are the ones that actually make us sicker. You need folate if you're going to make a baby. And obviously folate is just good. It's obviously one of the essential vitamins. Chicken liver is actually higher in folate than beef liver. So one ounce of beef liver has about 20% of your daily value. Whereas chicken liver, I think 1 ounce has 45% of your daily value. We don't know what the new norm is. If there's no symptoms, the question always is, does that then matter? There is some folate in lamb, and then there's also folate in egg yolk. I interviewed someone not too long ago, and they said that their patients consume the folate from supplements, from these organ supplements, and they don't see the needle move enough until they actually take a methylated B. Histamines are often thought of being released by MCAS, and MCAS is basically a immune system response to protect your body. When it comes to SIRS, it's not that. It's a histamine response as part of that innate immune side. One of the responses is a histamine response. So if you're suffering from SIRS, that histamine response is actually a gene activation. It's not related to MCAS. Now, when you consume meats and foods that have less histamines, you'll feel less of a symptom, but it's not because of the food itself that's making you have a histamine response. I hear it all the time. Carnivore made my histamines get worse. It's not, though. It's actually that maybe your gene activation is now more present and you're noticing it more compared to when you were eating all these plant-based foods that were inundating your body with so much inflammation that you didn't know what was up from down. Yeah, so my boys are on, they've been drinking raw milk forever. I'm a fan of it. It really depends on you. So, if, for example, any amount of sugars will affect your blood sugar, your insulin levels, if you're metabolically unwell, maybe it's not ideal for you. If a little bit of sugar then triggers you to want to binge, probably not ideal for you. I know that it's good for gut health, but then if you're really, really permeable with gut health, it may not still be good just because of the lactose. So it really depends. I would say for your individual body, just maybe try an ounce a day, see how you feel with your normal baseline of health. If you start feeling reactions, it might not be good, but you want to do that for about 3 to 5 days. The only thing you're introducing is little bits of raw milk. And that's how to ideally know if raw milk is benefiting you or not. So I'm a fan of probiotics. I think that so much of our world and the antibiotic use and the die off of some of the chemicals and pesticides we use, and a lot of our plant-based foods are riddled with the pesticide, glyphosate, et cetera. And so it's beneficial. But from my sickest clients, they cannot tolerate probiotics at first. Even if I tell them
Yeah.
to open the capsule and take a little bit, it affects them. And I think it's because their immune system is so heightened that any bit, whether it's good or bad, is going to affect them. So once you get to a place that you can tolerate them, I highly recommend a high quality one. If you're eating carnivore and long term you're doing good, maybe you do once a year for maintenance. But I think if you're coming from a standard American diet, you've been on antibiotics, you were born C-section, you didn't get breastfed. For those people, it may be beneficial just to do a dose. But once you're on carnivore long term, I think maybe once a year, once every 2 years.